And even though I had experienced a lot of negative things, I felt strongly that I should continue in the job that God had called me to. The Lamb family narrative took an unexpected turn. Jonathan and Susie Lamb have revealed some startling new information that could jeopardize Joni Lamb's entire career. They have discussed more than simply mundane family topics. It might undermine all Joni has done for decades. Now, the attention is on something else. News reports are today what were once whispers, and at last, the agonizing truth may be too huge to conceal. We don't feel comfortable at home, so Susie and I aren't telling anyone where we are at the moment. Please be aware that as of this afternoon, multiple national reporters have been provided with all of the proof. All of it has been sent to Julie Roy, who is currently working on a piece that will be published shortly. The Lamb family story used to appear like a wonderful illustration of strength and solidarity. However, when Jonathan and Susie came out with unimaginable claims, that picture broke apart. Their story goes that it all started in 2020 when their little daughter told them something that each parent wants to hear. She had been molested. The family was quite suspicious. Even though the child initially refused to identify the perpetrator, there was a gloom that persisted. Things spun out of control during a planned peaceful family vacation in Florida in August 2021. Jonathan claimed to have seen something that no father should ever see as he entered a room. His daughter was by herself, nude, and with a relative who went by Pete. At that moment, everything changed. Anger, dread, and doubt were all there at the same time. Jonathan and Susie could no longer be kept in the dark. They expressed their concerns to someone and made it apparent that they believed a terrible thing had occurred. However, the subsequent events were nearly as agonizing as the discovery itself. For support, consolation, and action, they turned to Joni Lamb, the leader of Daystar and the mother of the Lamb family. They said she told them to be quiet, to keep the matter inside the family, and to put the good name of the ministry above all else. For Jonathan and Susie, this was the worst kind of lying. These parents believed that their daughter's appearance was more significant than the suffering she was going through. They hoped their daughter, and they would be joined by their granddaughter. However, they believed that the boss they received was more concerned with preventing scandals from occurring at Daystar. The weight of this choice destroyed the family tie. Susie and Jonathan had lost faith in their own home. They claimed that because they were terrified of the consequences of speaking the truth, they had to flee and hide where they were, that even if it meant telling those closest to them, they couldn't remain silent. They believed that God was urging them to speak up because it was worth the effort to defend the defenseless, regardless of how difficult it was for them. After that, the Lamb family was never the same. They should write about a few stories that will shortly make headlines. We didn't know this was going to be our life. We implored God for months that he would go a different path. However, we must ultimately follow their instructions. Hey, you have to talk, he says, and you do. It's the more difficult route. Leaving would have been easy. As difficult as it has been, we must do it if he says, I'm calling you to do this. However, he has always led the way. He has also given us a lot of tranquility. When the storm passed and Jonathan and Susie gave their accounts, everyone was watching Joni Lamb to see what she would say. Stories were being published, questions were abounding on social media, and thoughts had been circulating for months. The assertions were compelling and difficult to accept. As a Christian leader and grandma, she claims that after their little daughter informed them of the abuse, she advised her son not to contact the authorities. When Joni eventually did speak up, she did it in a way that only she could. She has a voice that profoundly affects people while performing on her own platform in front of the cameras for her show, Joni Table Talk. She spoke the sentences that would support her position while staring directly into the camera. I never withheld any information from you. Marcus never once lied. Joni's dilemma wasn't limited to her family. It was about everything she and her late husband had created together, her ministry and her reputation. She gave the impression that the accusations were not only untrue, but also a part of a scheme to remove her from her position as leader. She thought Jonathan and Susie weren't acting like unhappy parents who desired justice. They were resentful and angry, she said. She informed the audience that Jonathan was upset about being expelled from Daystar, and that his grief over not being recognized as his father's heir had become even more intense. She claimed that the accusations were not based on the facts, but rather on her rage. As she talked, Joni's comments were both sad and uncompromising. She talked about how much she had invested in her children and grandchildren, and how much she loved them. She also expressed how angry she was to be charged with such a thing. She shared with her audience that she had dedicated her entire life to serving God and operating one of the largest Christian television networks in the world. She found it incomprehensible that anyone would believe she would ever stand up for someone who had harmed a kid, particularly her own granddaughter. She asserted that God knew her heart and that those closest to her were spreading false information about her. I want to encourage you because, despite the chaos and gloom, God always sees the wider picture. As long as we stand in the truth, speak the truth, and obey His commands, He will see us through. He will, I'm sure. Nevertheless, because this journey has been difficult, we continue to need and value your prayers. All right? Thanks. Even though Joni said she had done nothing wrong, she persisted in challenging what Susie and Jonathan were stating. She claimed that while Jonathan was employed at Daystar, he was given a comprehensive growth plan, and he was fired for not adhering to it. She even claimed that he had rejected her offer to try to resolve their differences by going to therapy with him. This further demonstrated to Joni that Jonathan was solely interested in getting even, and not making amends. She believed that he was more upset about his dismissal from the ministry than he was about obtaining justice for his daughter. She added that the police inquiry was concluded from the beginning. She informed everyone that, primarily due to her granddaughter's lack of information, the police had not yet discovered any concrete evidence. That demonstrated to Joni that there had been no misconduct or cover-up. Simply put, Jonathan and Susie's intention to harm the family's reputation in public made an already depressing situation worse. She emphasized that although the issue wasn't investigated for years, it was immediately following Jonathan's dismissal from Daystar, which she believed wasn't an accident. The Times spoke to her in every way. It was only a deception, not the truth. Her fervent denial didn't help the fact that many were beginning to doubt her. Many onlookers said that she came out as protective rather than honest, because she refused to even acknowledge that she might have been mistaken. She seemed more interested in preserving her own and Daystar's reputation than she did in alleviating her granddaughter's suffering. One of the worst things about her response was that notion. Where many had anticipated humility and responsibility, there was resistance. Joni persisted, though. She informed the audience that her husband Marcus had previously faced accusations and had remained loyal to the end. No matter how much it hurt, she said, that fight would continue. Her tears and determination were sufficient for her supporters. They trusted her. They supported Joni because they saw her as a holy woman who was being attacked. And they thought Jonathan and Susie were insane or even being duped. Numerous letters of support were received. Prayers were offered for her, and many Christians defended her by claiming that she was being unjustly held responsible for her children's deaths. However, nobody outside of Joni's small circle of devoted fans found her claims to be true. When the first truth was revealed, people questioned her about why she hadn't been more outspoken right away, and why she hadn't called for a thorough review. If she had nothing to conceal, why would she advise her son and daughter-in-law not to call the police? People still had concerns, and Joni's refusal to explicitly address them further strengthened her detractors' belief that she was more concerned with protecting Daystar than pursuing justice. As time passed, Joni continued to promote the notion that the incident was a spiritual conflict. She informed the locals that the enemy was making every effort to harm her, her family, and the assignment God had assigned her. She claimed that although the attacks were painful, she had faith that God would reveal the truth to her when the time was right. She prayed for her family as well as for herself, hoping that they would recover and be reunited. However, she refused to admit her guilt or find a compromise even in those pleas. She maintained that those who had accused her were mistaken, and that she was innocent. Her remarks have created a deep division inside the Lamb family that appears to be irreparable. While Joni continues to claim that she was attacked by someone with malicious intent, Jonathan and Susie are still committed to identifying the culprit. The Christians must choose between two contradicting stories and determine which to believe. Since Joni has been their supervisor for decades, some people continue to follow her. Some believe that her refusal confirms their suspicions that they are being misled. Without a question, Joni's response has ensured that the matter will not be quietly resolved. She has clearly distinguished herself from those who are accusing her by claiming that the entire situation is a smear campaign and denying any wrongdoing. She stated unequivocally that the controversy will continue to cast a long shadow over her ministry, her family, and the legacy she has spent her whole life working to establish. Even though the Lamb family was suffering, there was immediate public interest in the case. The questions were being posed, and no amount of denial would stop them. Behind it all was a mistreated child and a family divided between the law, their obligation to be together, and their faith. Jonathan and Susie anticipated a strong reaction and a strong desire to pursue justice when they told their mother what their daughter had said. Instead, they claimed to have discovered pushback. They claimed that Joni warned them to exercise caution, and even to keep things under wraps. Whether she intended to or not, her response raised some of the most significant ethical and legal issues that a church and a family may face. In Texas, the law is unambiguous. You should contact the police immediately if you believe a child is being abused. You must do it. Praying about it first is not a good idea. The business cannot manage it alone. The state has a valid justification for wanting it. Since children are particularly vulnerable to harm, laws were created to ensure their safety above all else. Susie and Jonathan claim that they followed the proper procedures and voiced their concerns as soon as it became apparent that something was amiss. However, their true statement regarding Joni was that she tried to stop them from heading in that direction and advised them to keep silent for the benefit of the church and the family. That decision doesn't simply make me question my judgment if it's true. There are violations of the law. Because there was insufficient information for the police to proceed, it persisted after the first case was resolved. After experiencing trauma, children may become silent, and cases frequently end without their input. However, from a societal perspective, the adult's responsibilities remained unchanged. To support the youngster and create an environment where privacy was unimaginable and safety was assured. Some critics of Joni claim that she prioritized Daystar's reputation over her granddaughter's pleas, giving the ministry's name more weight. Many onlookers viewed that decision as a moral failing on the part of the leadership as well as a personal error. Religious organizations frequently have to strike a compromise between their legal obligations and their spiritual convictions. Historically, churches and ministries have sought to resolve conflicts in a private, biblically based manner, rather than disclosing them to the public. However, when the allegations are as severe as abuse, these customs violate the law. The Lamb family represented that accident in this instance. Is it possible that a grandmother who oversaw a network that instructed millions of people on how to be decent would have opted for silence rather than transparency? What does it say about the way things are done at establishments like Daystar, where public image and family history are so intertwined if she did? More than one family is impacted by certain moral dilemmas. They enter the homes of those who turn to Daystar for moral advice and reach out to other Christians. Jonathan and Susie's defenders argue that their timing is incorrect, that their charges are motivated more by rage than by facts, and that Jonathan and Susie are making claims because they are upset. Even those who support it, however, are unsure about their thoughts. Because even if the facts are contested, it stings a lot to consider that such grave charges might have been handled quietly rather than forcefully. Furthermore, trust isn't always solid. Trust is the foundation of faith. According to Joni, the ethical and legal concerns are now interchangeable. She insists she never concealed anything and never advised her son not to pursue justice. She believes that the entire controversy is a fabrication, an effort to damage her reputation and cast doubt on her leadership skills. However, the questions seem to become louder the more she claims she doesn't. What prevented further action following the initial disclosure? Why wasn't the issue handed over to the police immediately? In addition to adhering to the regulations, did she do everything within her power as a grandmother and leader to safeguard the child at the center of it all? In addition to the family's conflicts, the situation raises additional ethical concern. What public figures should do while they are in the spotlight? Daystar was created to spread the truth, faith, and optimism. Many people watched because they thought the voices on TV would uphold the values they discussed. More than just the family is being examined when allegations such as these are made public. That would be the actual organization. If a group's leaders are accused of prioritizing appearance above reality, can the group continue to claim itself as a model of Christian values? And if the leaders refuse to resign during such an investigation, what does it say about accountability in Christian groups? Attorneys who have witnessed crises of this nature occur in other ministries caution that the consequences will extend well beyond the legal system. Churches or networks risk losing all of their moral authority if they fail to appropriately handle abuse charges. The decades-long trust can be destroyed in a matter of months when individuals stop contributing or watching. Daystar might have suffered even more from Marcus Lamb's passing and the ensuing scandals than from the court ruling. These charges could have equally negative moral repercussions. The issue of justice being delayed is another. The case was re-examined after a long period of time, allegedly due to fresh information. That raises some difficult issues. If more had been done from the beginning, may justice have arrived sooner? Could years of uncertainty, anxiety, and gossip have been avoided for the child at the center of this? There is a weight that can never be completely removed from each minute that passes without being shared. However, despite the high stakes, the battle lines remain established. Susie and Jonathan are on one side. No matter what, they believe they are choosing the difficult route of accountability and honesty. However, because she claims she is being unfairly targeted and misrepresented, Joni is sticking to her denial. A child, a ministry, and a community in the midst must contend with morality, the law, and the agonizing reality that faith by itself does not exempt one from duty. The inquiries will persist no matter how many times they are rejected. Was Joni not a capable leader and grandmother? Did she allow her yearning for justice to be overshadowed by her fear of scandal? Or is she the target of lies and rage, as she claims? Although it might take some time for courts and investigators to come to a conclusion, it is already evident that these issues carry a great deal of moral significance. She has caused pain to those who once trusted her as a leader. Because Daystar appears apprehensive in the face of such a grave charge, people are beginning to question whether she has compromised the principles she taught. Whether or not she is found guilty, this is true. When the story initially surfaced, people discussed it in private and on internet discussion forums. A few blog entries can be found here, as well as a few tweets. However, the allegations against Joni Lamb and the Daystar network quickly gained national prominence. Suddenly, a family quarrel became a major issue, and once the media got their hands on it, there was no going back. Reporters are drawn to stories that combine faith, money, power, and deceit. And they were all in this story. This Christian broadcasting family was adored by people everywhere, and millions of people were impacted by their ministry. Dark allegations of abuse and cover-up are now being made. The scandal continued to grow from the initial pieces in Christian magazines until major networks began to air the issue. The flames grew hotter with every new narrative, portraying Joni as a leader under attack rather than merely a depressed grandmother. An important turning point was when Jonathan and Susie decided to tell everyone what had happened. It wasn't simply family they were speaking to. They had a message for everyone. Interviews, sentimental remarks, and even their obvious fear of retaliation. Together, they created a potent television show. Did one of America's most famous Christian families fail to protect their own? Was one of the dramatic queries that news anchors used to open parts. Talk shows discussed the matter and invited attorneys and pastors to comment. The story didn't go unnoticed by the media, and many were intrigued. The attention was too much for Joni to handle. Every comment she made on her own show was dissected by commentators. Videos of her sobbing while denying it went viral, but rather from garnering her support, they frequently resulted in severe abuse. According to several observers, her address sounded rehearsed and more like a defense than an earnest appeal. Others claimed that she turned what many perceived as a moral and legal failure into a spiritual battle narrative by using religious language as a weapon, even though it wasn't accurate. It was now evident that she was more concerned with preserving her reputation than with her family. Because of social media, things grew worse. Hashtags began to spread like wildfire. While some supported Joni, others supported Jonathan and Susie. Former Daystar employees started to voice their opinions online. While some claimed to be merely irate, others concurred with Jonathan's assertions. Old films of Marcus and Joni speaking about ethics and honesty were reposted, but this time the harsh subtitles questioned whether the words had ever meant anything at all. The more Joni attempted to portray the story as an enemy attack, the more people claimed she was evading the actual issue. Their business was also harmed, in addition to their reputation. Donors ceased to provide. Once pleased to collaborate with Daystar, a few congregations started to distance themselves. Some subtly removed Daystar programs from their lists of suggested programs. The episode was utilized by support groups to highlight how religious organizations far too frequently handle abuse reports in the wrong way. Despite decades of hard labor, Daystar's reputation suffered with every shift. Another aspect of the show was the family's separation. The news websites contrasted Joni's public denials with Jonathan's heartfelt messages to his mother. For those who witnessed it, the news reports described it as a battle for Daystar's soul. There was a situation unfolding in real time, Truth loyalty and familial loyalty are at odds with one another. As with most events, people were ready to take sides. Christian society broke apart as a result of the pressure. Some pastors defended Joni, claiming the accusations were unfounded or even untrue. Others demanded accountability, arguing that no leader, regardless of fame, should be immune from criticism. Divergent viewpoints among the church led to contentious debates during Bible study and Sunday school. To Joni, what had once been a religious community that united people now appeared to be a battlefield. The worst blow was the loss of trust. There was more to Daystar than just television. The foundation of the ministry was the pledge to be authentic and to uphold the principles it promoted. Every story, headline, and post that went viral questioned that claim, and no matter how many times she claimed she wasn't guilty, the shadow of skepticism grew. Because of the ongoing media attention, the scandal lasted far longer than Joni or her supporters had anticipated. Even when new things transpired more slowly, speculation continued. Podcasts and documentaries took notice of it and conducted their own in-depth investigations into the claims and the family's history. Once personal to Joni, the issue has become ingrained in her public character. Its impact extended beyond Daystar itself. It caused a lot of viewers and believers to consider the more significant issue of accountability in religious organizations. If it was possible at Daystar, where else was it taking place? For example, how many leaders opted to remain silent rather than raise their voices? How many victims had been overlooked for the sake of their reputation? Joni's narrative turned into an unavoidable indicator of a larger issue: family dissolution. Ultimately, the media's intense focus not only exposed Joni's leadership shortcomings, but also exacerbated them. The distance appeared to widen each time she attempted self-defense. Many people didn't care what the court ultimately decided because their opinions had already been formed. The damage was done. The damage was actual. Additionally, Daystar's once glowing reputation was now marred by a stain that could not be erased by passionate denials or TV prayers.